We're going to be talking about how do I find the circumference and area of a circle. So what I like to do first are some vocab that I'd like to look over. A radius that we have, one of the things that we'll need to know about with circles is the radius. It's the distance from the center to a point on the circle. So any part on the outside equidistant from the center, those outside points, those are all capable of being part of the radius. So I would draw a line from the center to the radius. So I'm going to call this one, for our example, r. You'll see that in every single formula that we do, radius is signified as r in algebraic terms. And so what we're also going to talk about now is also the diameter. I'm going to make that in green as I do this. And so that is the distance from 2 points on the outside of the circle with the center as its midpoint. And so that's another thing that we want to talk about today. We'll be using that for our circumference, which we'll find out later. And so that's signified with these green lines right here. And so I'm going to label that as D. And so you'll find that in every formula that diameter is called D in the vocab form, in the formula for it. One thing we're going to be trying to find out with every circle is circumference, which is kind of like perimeter for circles. They give it a special name because it's not straight lines but a curve. And a circumference is the distance around a circle. The distance around a circle. So this would be circumference, which I'll call C for our formulas. And then a special term that we use, a special number that the ancient Greeks termed, pi, is what we're going to be talking about as well. This is a ratio that describes the distance around it as well. We use this term because it's the special number found that they've always seen that the diameter is 1/3 of the circumference. In other words, the circumference is just a little bit over 3 times the length of the diameter, and that's technically the number is 3.14 times. And they found that for every circle. It didn't matter what diameter it was, how big it was. It was always, the circumference was always 3.14159, and it kept going times the size of the diameter. And so they called this special number pi. And so that's where we get this number pi. We'll be using that for our formulas for circumference as well as area. And area is just simply the space on the surface of a two-dimensional circle. And so those are our parts for that. What we're going to be looking at next is if I were to dub parts of a pizza as a circle, if I were to talk about circumference, I'd be talking about the crust of the pizza. And if I were to call circumference the crust of the pizza, it's kind of like the perimeter, the outside of our pizza. And so circumference is like the perimeter for circles. It's the distance around, as we talked about. And I'm going to D-I-S-T-A-N-C-E, around a circle. And circumference equals pi, which is 3.14, which I put right here, times our diameter, which we call D. And so if we have a diameter of 9 inches, to figure out our perimeter or our circumference, what we would do is we would do 3.14 or pi times my diameter, which in our case is 9 inches. And so I would do that on my calculator. Get that right now. So if I were to figure that out right now, it'd be pi 3.14 times 9, and that's going to give me 28.26. And since our unit for our diameter is inches, it would be 28.26 inches. And so I would like for you to look at part F here as well, where you have a radius is 3 meters for, or just this other example. What if I just have a radius? Well, a radius is simply 2 times the length, or is 1/2 of a diameter. And so if I have a radius, I can just double it to be 6. And so if I look at this, I could just draw another line here, and this would be also 3 meters. And so this would be 6. And so if I would have that, I would do 3.14 times 6, and I would do that on the calculator. 3.14 times 6, and that's going to give me 18 and 84 hundredths meters. So my circumference is 18 and 84 hundredths meters. And that's how I find circumference. I simply take the pi, I take my number pi, and then multiply by whatever my diameter is. If I just have a radius, I double it. And that's how we figure that out. What we're going to look at now is, well, what about area? All the toppings inside my pizza. And so area, simply by definition, is the space inside a circle. And this is just a two-dimensional figure, so it's just the surface of it, so all this stuff. And so I'll do that. We're going to erase that. But it's the space inside of a circle. And our formula for that is pi r squared. And so what I do with that is, if I have this example where I have 3 centimeters as my radius, because it's half the distance across, I would take pi, which is 3.14, times 3 to the second power. And so I would take 3 squared, that equals 9. So I would do 3.14 times 9. And then I get my calculator. .14 times 9. And I get 28.26. And because it's area, 28.26, and my label is centimeters squared. Because it's area, I have to have square centimeters. I have to imagine that this would be like a grid of little small square centimeters here. Now what if I have a diameter? If I look here and I have a diameter and I need radius, if this is 9 inches for the whole length across, I cut it in half to find the radius. And so the way I find the area of this circle is I have 9 divided by 2, which would be 4.5. So I do 3.14 times 4.5 to the second power. And it's important that you do not square the whole thing, just the radius, because it's pi r squared. So do not do the whole thing, just the radius is what you square. So we'll do 4.5 squared first. 4.5 squared. And I get 20.25. So I'm going to rewrite that in here. So I'm going to do pi times 20.25. And if I do that on the calculator, I should get something close to 60. So I'll do 20.25 times 3.14. That's going to give me 63.59, because I just tripled whatever my radius squared was. So my answer I get is 63.59, and it would be inches squared for this example here. So to conclude, we have circumference, which is pi times the diameter. And then we have area, which is pi r squared. So I'm going to do C equals pi times D. And then we have our area equals pi r squared. Our unit for circumference is just whatever our measurement is. So if it's centimeters for our radius or our diameter, it would just be centimeters for our length, because it's a distance, it's one-dimensional. But area, it'd be whatever our unit is squared. And so with that, I'd like you to finish your notes for the page. and complete those circles in your notes. And then from there, you can continue with today's activity. So with that, that's how we find area for circles as well as circumference.